Partnership with Terracrux Games, which is a local game store that supports inclusivity and community as much as we do. So tonight we're going to try out a new series for ZGN. It's called Side Quest. We're going to be bringing on as many GMs as we can. And I forgot what else I wrote and I can't read it. So tonight's episode is called A Brave New World, or How I Learned to Build an Engaging Environment for My Players. And that's our starting point, at least. From where we go after that, that's going to be up to you guys. So if there's any questions you have, we're going to do our best to answer any that you guys have. You're more important than anything we can come up with. So let us know what you guys are thinking. Just call it out and let us know. And if there's anyone in particular you want to ask, just let us know. So, as you know, I'm Bryce. With me tonight, I have Ethan something.
Good.
Petra Wilson. Excellent. And Sharon. I've never met her before. I don't know who she is.
I introduced myself when I got here.
Moving on. So, tonight, talking about world building. Anybody want to go with what their heart says to them about world building? No?
No, you're the host. This is your fault.
Yeah, right?
This is your
Thanks,
problem.
guys. Well, okay, so my approach to world building is pretty straightforward. I see what the party's looking to do, and then I say no. And then I say what I'm trying to do, like a frustrated novelist, and then I put them on railroad tracks.
How many games are you jamming right now?
Right now, 0.5. I'm in the research stage.
Okay.
Also, the book hasn't come out in hard copy. It's only in PDF right now, and I'm really wanting to get a hard copy in my hands.
That's just not as fun.
Yeah.
Can't hold it. Harder to
It's a new
flip
game.
It is. It's called Crystal Heart. It's set in. Uses the Savage Worlds new system.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited for that. But since it just got kickstarted, it's not out yet. And I've been talking to the publisher about it to say, hey, guys, when is this coming out? Alas, he said sometime January.
Wow.
That was a lie. But I don't blame you. It's okay. Printing happens. You can check it out at up4players.com. It's started as a webcomic, turned into a game setting. It's actually really cool. Maybe you'll see it in the future on stream, but don't know. I got to try it out first. As I said, 0.5. Working on that.
Fair enough.
I don't actually put my players directly on rails.
No.
I personally like to focus on the characters that make the world. So I'll have some loose concepts of, oh, look, you're in a city. The city doesn't matter to me because the city isn't what's important. For me, it's the people that make the city. So, cool. City's there. There's going to be somebody who sells garbage. I mean, you could call them trinkets. You can call them whatever you want. But there's somebody who's going to sell garbage.
Garbage seller.
You may call this trash.
See?
I call them treasures.
And that is exactly how I would then start shaping the world, is by the people who inhabit it. And that's one of my strengths as a GM is personification and characters. And so I use that to then build the world around it.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Ethan?
Yeah. Me, I'm an incredibly low rent game master, in which most sessions consist of me panicking the day of, scribbling things down over the course of 4 hours, showing up, and nobody needs to know that that's how it went down. Pre-prep phase, pretty simple. Just, I don't personally tend to run pretty much any modules, not because I think there's necessarily anything wrong with them, but I do not have the time or focus to go through and properly read down a module.
Yeah.
Same.
Just make it all up, I guess. So it's usually a pretty solid, like, bare bones skeleton of something, relatively, in the opposite direction, a little more place heavy, and then go from there. Like, what's something, usually like one interesting event in the history that would be a real focal turning point. That's something that I can call back to in the middle of play, and then go from there, like, who's currently running it? What's maybe their affiliation with some of the people nearby? And then fill in all of those blanks during play. Sometimes if something comes to me, I've usually got this folder, this notebook on here. in my bag, which is with me a lot. So I can kind of bust it out whenever I feel the need to. But it's pretty much usually just making it up about 70% on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? How do you like to handle such things?
I think it's really important to keep that fresh thing going on. So even if you've got it set in stone and maybe you've been through it multiple times before and you know how different players are going to take their approach, but you should still be expecting the players to come up with something completely novel. But also you have to keep it fresh for yourself because it is a performance and you have to stay engaged with your audience as you're making the game happen. So I think it's important to remember to keep it fresh. And so just changing it on yourself in the fly is really important, no matter how much prep you do. That said, I like to borrow from lots of things. I think that was one of the initial suggestions in role-playing games. They were like, make it your own, Make it your own. And so I really took that to heart. And I like to borrow from a lot of different published things. I like to work in a generally published world, but then sort of screw with the elements of the world in order to make it unpredictable to even players who are familiar with the source material. And then, it's like you say, you want to focus on a location, the personalities in that location, and then let the players run free and have enough pieces and bits. It's like a good coder. It's all about what you've got in your toolbox. If you have a snippet of code that you could just pull out and plug in right at the right time, then a lot of times you're not going to be forced to have to make something up completely from wholesale cloth.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can still, work it, bend it, and shape it into something that fits and makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Now it's
No, we're going left.
Yay. But my approach to building a world, first of all, I try not to. I try to avoid it whenever possible. Either by making the scale of the world not relevant, or by I'll use something that's pre-made, kind of like you do. I'll use pre-existing world settings, but I'm not super beholden to what's already there, and I'll change things as necessary. Nobody's ever really quibbled with me on the history of Galarian before, so it hasn't been a big deal. And what did I tell you when you did that?
It doesn't matter. Shut your mouth.
That's what I said, and I stand by it. You get that on the other end of the stick. It doesn't matter. Shut your mouth. But yeah, when I'm building a world from scratch, usually I fully flesh out a starting point and an ending point, and I'll put two either landmarks or quest triggers or encounters or something in between, and then I have a folder of random encounters that I can pull out, and then those go on the map so you can return to them, and I never reuse that encounter. So if you were going to look at a map that I had been using, it would look approximately like I only built encounters in the party's path, because that's kind of what happened. But that way I can pre-build interesting encounters instead of just rolling stuff off of an encounter table, which always bothered me.
right.
They don't make a lot of sense sometimes, where it's oh, grasslands. Okay, cool. Lions, but also angels. Don't worry about it. They're there.
Yeah.
All right, that's weird, but
yeah, I don't know. Encounter tables they're a nice tool, but you either got to be able to think on your feet or do some hand waving to make that happen. And so it's a fine starting point for an encounter, but then I like to do some building around that and figure out, why is this happening right now? I'm trying to think of an example of something off of an encounter table, but I can't right now.
Well, I don't know. That's a pretty good example.
Yeah.
We've got some angels in the Great Steppe with some tigers or lions. Lions?
I don't know. It changes.
Lions.
Lions.
Sometimes they're tigers.
And also bears.
But also halflings. You just run into a random group of halflings. The encounter tables go from, okay, random snakes, to at the end, you rolled 100 or whatever. Now there's angels who just happen to be in the area. How are you going to deal with that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a level 2 dude walking around getting ready to beat some snakes. And I gotta fight angels.
Y'all want some jerky?
I've got rations for you still.
Well, the encounter tables also have CR on them, so I just take like an appropriate like CR plus or minus 2, and then everything else is no encounter.
And
So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely don't want a level 1 party being like, let's piss off some angels.
We can do it, guys.
I thought this is not the topic of this episode, but it is important to know sometimes it's just the party's fault.
Oh no, yeah.
It's very important.
Sometimes it is.
What are you gonna do?
But you also have to know, like, if you have a party that is going to be antagonistic with everything,
Yeah.
maybe don't immediately throw in something that's just going to curb stomp them.
It's quitter talk.
Like, oh, you guys are complete murder hobos. Here's a Tarrasque. Have fun.
Murder
you know,
hobo
I
this,
just,
guys.
yeah, right. So, like, I'm all for natural consequences, and like theoretically, you should be able to know off the bat that you should not try to bargain with Belial while he's in the middle of doing something. Like, that's just a bad idea. But
She brings this up
consequences,
because it
that's a
may
very
have recently
specific
happened
example.
At some point in one of the games that she's running. Just putting that out there so that way her pointed comment sticks home, hopefully.
It's
Yeah,
lived experience.
all of the
I'm in that party, but it wasn't me.
all of the archdevils that were encountered were extremely reasonable, because otherwise it would have just been TPK, TPK, TPK.
Over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I try and give my players warnings when they're pushing their own limits. You know, maybe their horse just stalls and doesn't want to move forward.
My horse hasn't had an oil change in 3,000 miles.
Or another adventuring party that failed. Corpses are littered across the trail as they start to walk down a particular lane that they were already told they didn't want to go down that way.
So what do you do then when the players willfully ignore these, that guy looks kind of like me, but he's dead. Moving forward.
Right? Then they're upping the stakes.
Okay.
So you've got to up the stakes.
How far do you up until it just becomes, all right, guys, we've reached a stalemate, you're going to die, and the game ends, or you're going to re-roll, or...
That's why we have rules. Because if we just push the story game as far as we can, then eventually it becomes completely absurd, and everybody's lost their sense of disbelief, and it's just they either bust up laughing, which can be good, or they lose interest, and they're not taking it seriously either way. So I think you have the rules so that you can push it up until the point where it's statistically likely that they will die. And then every once in a while, they'll survive long enough to actually meet their goal or to figure it out and run away at the last minute with 1 hit point.
I
dragging
escaped
the
barely.
dead cleric behind them, you know. But I think it's okay to let players die every once in a while, because that reinforces the risk. And I think that's one of the other aspects that we should touch on when you're trying to involve your players. It is this, you know, a lot of what role-playing games are about are this sense of risk and reward. Like, you're risking something and you're going to get a reward out of it. And I don't think if that risk isn't real in some way, and maybe it's not your character that is what's being risked, but if the player themselves isn't putting some investment into it in order to have that challenged, then you definitely aren't going to be able to keep them engaged.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's the truth.
So something I realized is that we're talking about a lot of games broadly, but certain games interact incredibly different with world building as well as where you come from a story point. So I don't know about you guys, but my main things that I DM are Pathfinder. I've done a little bit of Fate. I see you have the Fate book, so I bring that up. A little bit of Fate, not a whole lot.
I'm learning Fate right now.
It's a lot. It's really nice.
I hear good things.
Hardcover.
See, what
I
else?
hear things about it.
World of Darkness.
Not all good.
A couple other
I've
things,
also
but
heard
primarily
okay
Pathfinder.
things.
That's the D20 systems where I originally started. So that's where I end up falling a lot. If I want a lot of people to join, if I'm looking for a specific storyline type of game, I'll go with World of Darkness, because it's to me it's a lot easier to loose rules on things like we're just gonna, you get a +1 die or 2 because That's the one I go to were loser stories. I played and ran a couple of other different systems, but they're more out there, like Ars Magica and God, what's some of the other ones I've tried? A lot of random stuff. Really not important since I don't have as much experience with them.
Right.
What about you guys?
I have run, and there's possibly more than this because my memory is absolutely terrible, and this is why I take notes as a dungeon master. Dungeons and Dragons, both 3/3.5. It was a mix of books that were available, and 5th edition. And I've played in more than these. Savage Worlds, Monster of the Week is one I like, especially for world building, because I enjoy doing it in like this is an Earth as we know and live it with extra shenanigans going on. So you can kind of like borrow things from a certain angle and then plug them into like a different. How do goblins do their taxes? What are goblin taxes about? Are there home income taxes on a hovel? And currently I'm running the Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars system, which is also a very plot-heavy driven dice system that they've got going on, which is fun. But also all of that world building as far as the grand scope already exists. So when it comes to world building and that, it's a much more like minute what's going on. The current game that I'm running in it right now is taking place on an asteroid belt penal colony. So all of the world building I'm doing is based around the actual inner workings and society and interplay between the factions running the different asteroids on this imperial penal colony and how they interact with one another and all that good business.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Are we going to the left again?
I think we're still going to the left.
You guys can find it out.
Continuously to the left. The far
It's
left.
the clockwise rule. We're in the northern hemisphere, right? It's a time of peace, anyway. Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I've played in all editions of Dungeons and Dragons, and I think in that sense, I've got a kind of advantage. And I've seen a lot of other independent role-playing games. One of my favorite of which, by the way, Sky Realms of Jarun. The combat system is wicked detailed and fast, deadly. Like it's very realistic in that sense. And the magic system and the character advancement system are really cool, where you roll and your successes give you points to spend, which then give you a chance to increase particular stats. The completely open development build is interesting, pretty awesome.
Modules are cool, Voodoo, but sometimes getting a nice world build helps with the module to make it feel incorporated.
Right? No.
Small rejection, sorry.
Yeah, but you know that's the thing with modules is you come to the end of the module and then you've got these other modules that you want to run.
Yeah.
How do you get from point A to point B? Because your players are like, but I want to bring my character, not make your pre-gen or whatever.
Well, if you're my 5e GM right now, you just have a homebrew that you stick modules into, and so the homebrew functions as kind of that connective tissue.
Yeah, and I think even if you've got a prepackaged campaign world where I sort of like, I love Greyhawk and I always come back to it because I've become addicted to it over the last 20 years. But, and maybe it's a bit of a crutch at this point, but I'm trying to break out to new things soon.
Okay.
But even in Greyhawk, I mean, the whole point of this, Gygax said when he created it, he was like, you know, I want you to make it different. I want you to take it in a different direction. And I think you almost have to do that. Especially back in the day, there just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough to keep a campaign going. If you were in one particular area of the map, you know, there might be 3 or 4 modules in the whole published canon that you could run at all in that area of the world, you know. And today it's a much older map, and there's thousands of different modules that are all in here, and there's even more independent ones. But at some point, you're going to have to customize those modules to either fit into the region that you're in because you've run out of stories to tell in it that are prepared for you, or you're going to have to start building off little spin-offs on what you've done. To keep it going long term, I think. But, you know, you'll get more out of your characters when they feel like they should be contributing to that.
Mhm.
So I guess I don't want to take up too much time. Pass to the next, but
You're good.
But to keep on my thing here, so when we started out with the older games, the problem is they didn't have a whole lot of playtesting. I mean, they'd done a lot of playtesting. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of playtesting in 1974 and 1980, again in 82. The different evolutions of the product were the result of real research. But every step built on the last one, and we got better and better, except for 4th edition. And then we got.
I'll die on that. I think
Okay.
4th edition is good.
Okay.
I think it's a good game.
Was it your first system?
Well, I meant better and better. I'm not saying it's
3 was your first system.
bad, but it was maybe a step.
To each their own. I think it's a great board game.
It was a sharp
yeah.
deviation from the method of play that had been previous, and it was not one that worked for me, but it did get a lot of new players into D&D.
Yeah, I like it a lot for what it is as a mechanical system. It's not my preference. It's not the one I choose to play, around the home table with my home group or whatever. But I don't know, I think it's fun. I'm sorry. That was a very strong interjection.
It is what I
it's
bought
a
for my
good thing.
preteen son because I thought it'd be easier for him to learn the mechanics than trying to explain THACO.
I think it's such a great
I don't know
board
why people
game
have such a problem with THACO.
because that goes weird.
THACO's fine.
It's super weird.
So easy.
4th edition, there's nothing wrong if you like it. It's got its place.
He said, smirking.
I can feel it. I can feel the energy radiating.
There's
So,
nothing
okay,
wrong
the
if you
problems
like
in
it.
the editions in the past led you to this inescapable
Yeah.
moment in role-playing games, and this is where I try and push my players. When I get them in, I've convinced them to join me in the world, and now I want to help them destroy it. So I try and push them into situations where the rules are not likely to function, because then they will have to realize that we have to make them up as we go, and that really is about agreeing on the rules so that we've got some context for us to tell a story in. And that, I think, that is the real benefit for role-playing games, is when you've gone beyond the rules. And to force yourself into that situation in 5th edition, I think, is pretty tough. In
I do
4th
my
edition, it's really hard, because there's just, the material that they give you is not likely to put you into a situation, because they designed it that way, where you're going to have a novel idea that is not going to work under some kind of rule that is simplified enough to make it work. But the rules are so simplified that, are they realistic? Well, they're balanced.
And
Realism is a bit of a fraught concept when it comes to the games to begin with, because, I mean, strict realism would, first of all, probably not be very much fun, but it would also lead to a lot of logistical minutia that I'm happier hand waving. I mean, honestly, I don't make you track your food. I don't make you track your rations unless I'm specifically building an encounter or a series of encounters where that's gonna matter. If you're going into the desert, yes, you need to know how much food and water you have. If you're just doing adventure things, no, you don't, because then that's boring. People get bogged down into this, and this actually happened. I wasn't making them track their food at all. And I'd specifically told them that I don't, but somebody was like, no, I'm on my last day of rations, and they spent 3 in-game days trying to hunt something in Stygia, so it didn't go great.
I'm not saying this was the same party,
It was the same
and I'm
party.
also not saying it wasn't me, because it wasn't me. But point out, Voodoo, you gotta get the arrows that have the black hole wrapped around it that shoot themselves into a bag. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but there's a really cool engineering, here's how it works, and it's insane to have these portable, black hole arrows.
Oh, if you want to get into the minutia of busting with the mechanics, there's so much fun you can have just breaking all the physics of the world.
Which is why I don't. I know Pathfinder like the back of my hand. I can break all of the rules in Pathfinder, and if you are sitting at my table, you will not know. Because I can do that on my side. Other systems I'm not nearly as comfortable with, and I can't do that as seamlessly. But if your game is how can I combine things in the in this way that breaks it, especially if it breaks the difficulty curve, the way that the portable hole in the back holding does,
It's so
I will
stupid.
tell you a story in a minute.
then I just don't allow it. And then I ask you to leave my table, to be honest. Like if that's your game, you don't belong at my table. I don't run like that kind of power gaming, like crunchy rules type of thing.
Yeah.
Like the rules is just the skeleton for the game that I really want to play.
Yeah.
And that's how I do it. So I've never had anybody try and bring one of those arrows in to a game, probably because they know what would happen. But I mean, people are welcome to, and I'm okay with that kind of expansion on pre-existing rules. But if it kills fun, then I don't allow it.
It's not.
Yeah,
it
like
doesn't have a place.
It's fun theory crafting, but once you bring it to an encounter, then what are you doing with your life?
I allowed my players to kill a young green dragon with 3 spells.
Go on.
Improved invisibility,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
actually 2 spells, and an item that is quasi-magical in some campaigns, banned in several for good reason, and included in canon in my open canon world, Greyhawk.
Okay.
Black powder, improved invisibility, and item.
So
Item is the spell that allows you to make it's basically a flat representation of whatever object. And the player in question had researched a little bit, which I tend to reward a lot.
it's good.
If you do your own homework, I'm going to give you extra credit for it. But, I mean, that's buy-in right there, so you got to reward it. But they had figured out that there was a ruling somewhere that if you took a lit torch and you cast item, that when you released the item spell, you would have a lit torch. So they got black powder, and they lit it, and they cast item on it. And then they took improved invisibility, and they rolled stealth, and they snuck up behind the dragon. And the roleplay was, so the dragon is laying there surveying his domain late in the evening, getting ready to lie down for a nice rest. All of a sudden, explosion. I rolled the saving throw. It was internal damage.
I think there's really only so much you can do against a black powder enemy.
Yeah.
They had a great time.
I would allow that. Like
It's-
that's like that. I don't think that kills fun.
No.
It's like you did some planning, which is good. You used your resources, which is good. And honestly, the only reason I might be disappointed is if that dragon was like actually a quest giver and I had a super cool side thing planned. Like that would be disappointing. But you know, I would still allow that because I think that it's important to reward that kind of research.
My thing has always been, all right, cool, you got it once. It's cool, you did some research, you thought up something I didn't even think about. Awesome, you get it once. And then if you try to get it again, that's where it becomes issues. Like, I'm fine with the portable arrow, the portable black hole arrows one time.
Mhm.
Like, okay, cool. You did this once. It wasn't against the big bad enemy that we've all been talking about, that you knew about. You just did it. You tried it once. All right.
Yeah.
Now it's impossible for you to find black holes or create them. It's weird. You did that. You did that, player. Now that's in the world. That's part of the world that this is now incredibly hard to get because they know about it.
Yeah. I mean, I know that I, as both a player and as a game master, am a sucker for a stupid, zany plan. There was one that I was playing in. This was a 3.5, the only genuinely like evil group campaign. It was a side campaign because I got into like Dungeons and Dragons and all this kind of stuff through like all of my old theater friends who were all like 15 to 20 years older than me. So I was the cool middle schooler hanging out with all the adults. And we had this side evil campaign. And we knew that somewhere in this giant forest that had this, keep on the side of it that was supposed to be defending the forest, there's some wizard we need to find, and there's somebody that we need to kill and take out there for somebody else. This was 9 years ago at this point. My memory's a little foggy. But I do remember that our exact order of operations were, okay, first thing we know, the wizard's tower is made to look like a tree. It's probably fireproof. So if we burn down the whole forest, the only thing left standing, in theory, would be the wizard's tower. So that's our step A.
That checks.
We go, we burn down the forest, we hang out in the keep that we took over for the next week and a half to let the whole thing clear out. We find this giant oversized tree that looks like it's pretty much cut off right halfway up, and we decide that's probably a wizard tower. And then we see a bunch of other little small trees dotting around this larger tree. So we have our half-fiend paladin of tyranny go fly over, do some scouting, because they have wings, so they can stay out of the range of whatever the trees are in theory going to do. Find out it's a bunch of tree ants, go back to the castle, get all of the oil stores, have the fiend of tyranny just slowly go over and drench all of them, and then, 600 feet away, me playing the war mage, gunslinger, finger gun, fireball, taking out all of those very silly tree ants just sitting out in the open. Then we found out the wizard...
You put them out in the open. They were camouflaged, Ethan.
We burned everything else down, and the trees in that tree were fine. We then found out that the spellcaster was a dragon, and we had some problem with that, of course, because it's a big dragon, and they're usually a problem to deal with. And then one of our characters, I think the Death Cleric, managed to goad them out of the tower along the bottom. And myself, the Paladin of Tyranny, and one of the other players, I think Christian actually, who was a part of this group, playing a soul knife. The three of us all drop attacked from the top of this 200-foot tower, swords pointed downward, dealt with the dragon problem, turned it into a giant skeleton because we had a death priest, and then we had a walking siege weapon. The whole problem was solved, and it never came up again.
So as much as I love old game stories...
No, that was a tangent. That's on me.
It happens, and it'll happen again.
I'm sure.
It's not the worst thing, because they're fun and entertaining, hopefully for everyone. Right? Everyone, right?
I'll do better.
And yes, AK, that should be a good tactic, is that if you want to do this, you've now put it into the world, now I can do this. A lot of GMs I've known have done the same thing with instant death spells, because they're not fun, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
When it's murder hobo-ish, when it's an aggressive or military tactic, when they're using it as a combat advantage, those are telltale signs that they're probably selfishly bending the rules.
Yep.
But there are other situations I've come across where, the rules aren't, they're kind of focused on combat in the first place, because it's a tabletop war game originally, now a role-playing game. But where people are more focused on society or the technology or the challenges of living in the medieval times or a unique climate situation or a mystery or just a scene that they want to pull off with their character that they think would be fun. And the rules don't really work to get them to that point in a way that's interesting, because the rules don't address it, or the rules make it too difficult for a character to reasonably be able to do something like that. So you start to work with them and try and figure out what their goals are, and then give them some steps. This is another thing. I talked about risk and reward a little bit, but there's also this idea of progression. So that rule there, anything you can do, I can do as well, is important, because it starts the arms race. And then they have to innovate the next way over the top military tactics style nuclear option. I think that can be fun, and it can push the game. Again, you want to keep this risk and reward and this idea of progression without forcing it to the point where it becomes ridiculous and they're either completely just making fun of it, which it was pretty far pushing it when I let them blow up a dragon, but they had spent so much time planning in advance. They came to me. They'd obviously spent at least 2 hours talking about it outside of game. So I bent my rule. But yeah, no, you want to avoid that kind of thing in that sense. But I think, motivating them to sort of spread that out. For example, I had a friend who was really interested in trying to create a revolutionary character, and he was also an engineer, and he wasn't into magic at all. And he sort of poo-pooed magic most of the time as solutions. He wanted better engineering.
Okay.
And I said, okay, well, you could be an inventor.
Mhm.
You know, you're going to spend time and money to do research just like you would for a spell.
Yeah.
Right? And you've got a limited number of these inventions that you're going to come up with over the course of my campaign here. So I don't give you too much free time. But, you know, he created this whole smelting process and a particular, like, unionization for the people who worked in the mines, how he was using byproducts from the mining process to build their housing. And, like, it was
That's
amazing.
awesome.
It was
Like-
awesome. It made a great story. He had immense fun and spent hours drawing diagrams and plans and metricing out all of the process work so that he could figure out exactly how many gold he was squeezing out of the deal to maintain
What
his
a
adventure.
Like, man.
I
So,
love it though.
because at the end of the day, we're here to have fun. We're here to play with our friends, and we're here to tell stories. So if one person is escalating this arms race in a way that not everyone's on board with, then why are we still doing this?
Yeah.
It's not fun. And I personally found that having to warp the world around that and getting back to the world building, having to warp that around like these one or two specific people that are trying to, I'm going around, I have a wand of disintegrate. It's like, well, cool, you're a one-man army, I guess, but this isn't fun for anyone anymore because there's no encounters really, or if I have to specifically design encounters or things that are tailored to you, I don't think that's all. I personally don't find that all that fun.
I'm not sure, but I think maybe your sentence might have jumped the tracks in the middle there.
Possible.
Having to warp the world around one player because, ooh, I got a wand of disintegrate, and then one-man army? Like,
Well,
let's go back.
The person with the wand of disintegrate is like a one-man army. 'Cause he's
Right,
dead,
no,
dead,
but
dead.
what I'm asking is, should we just take the middle of that sentence out and it becomes having to warp the world around one or two players isn't fun?
Yeah, we
Okay.
could probably just remove that. I was thinking about specific.
I was
I
legit
liked it.
confused.
I like
Ethan likes it, and Pax says he's entertaining, so it's 3 against 1.
Thanks, Pax.
We're not. That's all I got. That's all I got.
I don't know if it's true that it's not fun to world build with one or two players.
No, it's not that
Depends
it's.
on the other players.
Yeah, that's the
Right.
thing is that
Because
if
if they're trying to do their own thing and they just keep getting overshadowed by like the table time that the one or two players require to do their things, then there's some kind of balancing that needs to happen. Like either your more time hungry players need to be doing more things off screen, like between games, or you need to focus more on the players that aren't getting the time to do the development that they want. But there is some kind of imbalance that is happening in that case. I mean, if everybody's on board with, heck yes, mining operation, sure, then by all means, like that's the game now.
Yeah.
Whatever story was planned is now just happening in the background, and there may be consequences for not dealing with it, but
this mining operation is
now
going
the
on
game
point.
is capitalism, and that's what we're playing now.
Right. I think even if you're successful in getting everybody involved in their own unique project, that still is going to have the same problem.
Probably there are always going to be one or two players who end up dominating more than their fair share of table time. It's not necessarily dominating, but it is never an equal split.
I understand it's like a limited resource and you're trying to spread it around, but I mean, no, it's not necessarily that you're forced into a situation where you've got to make a player do something that they don't want to do in order to conserve enough time, resource for all of the players to be able to do something that they want to do. I do agree that is an issue, but I think even if you managed all the time perfectly and they were all sort of working their own projects, that still would not really be a full success. And the reason I say that is because what you really want is for the engineer guy who's building his perfected mine and the people's mine, I think he called it. For him to have
My
some
bad.
kind
It's
of
communism, the game.
it was an amazing character build. Anyway, so I mean,
Iron is for all of us.
The people's iron.
Yeah, I mean, how can these, okay, no, I'm not going to go into these diatribes. How can these nobles keep on ripping us off of our labor? I mean, they sell this stuff for all of this gold and we never get a share for a pittance. Coppers a day?
Trickle down. Don't worry about it.
Raise your pickaxes.
Maybe you'll be lucky enough to go on an adventure and live.
We get all the miners together. We go to the manse as a group because we have numbers.
Right, but you have some problem that you don't let him solve. And you tell him, well, you could solve it, but you'll need the help of a cleric and maybe a pretty intelligent magic user. And I hear tell that a rogue might be able to get you the component that you really need because it's available in this other guy's store, but he's not going to sell it to you because he knows you're his competition. All of a sudden, you've got the setup for an adventure, and your Mr. Johnson is one of the players who is now going to go recruit the rest of the players and get them to come help him. And now you don't even have to sell the world because your players are selling the world to themselves.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's the full success. And I think, that whenever you run into a situation where somebody's looking for those resources, you have to decide how valuable is it to you? Is this a game I want to play?
Yeah.
And then if you do, and the rest of the players are not going to be served by playing at the same time, definitely take it offline. But I also think that as a GM, you should be doing that with every one of your players on a fairly consistent, maybe not every session have a one-to-one aside moment, but there's just so many things you can't do on a table while you're surrounded with your peers that you can do one-to-one with the GM. I think that's really important to get to.
I fully support that, and I used to call them out of session role play, because it's like, all right, so we're not in session anymore, but we're all going to role play online via text. We're going to role play. We'll get together, have a drink, and we'll talk about how this thing happened, because then it starts to flesh out the world to them as well as to me, and it gets me like, what are you trying to do? What do you want to do in this game? Because if you're just the fighter running through things, okay, have fun. But if you're the fighter who's fighting for this cause, or I've seen characters, who take trophies because a certain person I know had bones in her hair of her deceased family members, because it was her way of honoring them. And so as she fought, she collected more weapons, because that's what she did, was a weapons trainer, and from her home village. And it adds up, but you're not getting these things just on the table, because on the table, cool, they fought the person, she grabbed their sword, walked away. There's no why did she do that really gets to come out.
Yeah. You kind of have to drag that out of play.
It is. Never gets. Blarlack had a question, and I don't know where it's at, because I was informed of it
I have it.
earlier. But luckily, Sharon has it.
Okay, so Blarlack asked, what methods have you used to get people to engage with the world and the people in it, rather than just bouncing from encounter to encounter?
I'll go first, because I have a thought and nobody else said anything.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes down to your, whether you do like a session 0 with your group, or whether, you talk to them individually and you're like, all right, this is the character you want to build. Let's talk about that, whatever. A lot of that, I think, at least for me, comes from the actual character building process. There's you leave a lot of open doors, and especially this works for how I like to run my games, because I have a lot of things that I have answers or something swirly and smoky, vaguely reminiscent of it, but I'm not necessarily married to that. So somebody comes in and they have this like character concept of, I want to play I want to be a Triton paladin, who's really into that, and maybe they come at it from like that mechanical perspective first. And then it's, your job as the game master, as the officiator of plot, to kind of goad them into what sounds interesting. Maybe do you have like any family that you were involved with? Just something even as simple as, why did you leave home? But getting them to engage with them from the get-go, from character building, where it's like, okay, I know this about my character. I know what my character's numbers and all of the text is.
Mm-hmm.
But from page 1, I have at least some level of I know where I fit here. And I can use that as a player to build onto the rest and figure out how I feel about things, figure out maybe what my goals are going forward. But I think it's really important to get that all of the way out the front door. At least a certain amount of, like, how do you fit here, at least a little bit.
Yeah, some kind of backstory. I mean, I also asked for like a life goal and a fear, and because I can use both of those to build interesting encounters. And whenever a player or a character or both are kind of drifting away from the plot, then I can dangle that goal. I can give you a clue, or I can give you like a pathway or something to go towards that, and that almost inevitably forces people to engage with the world, because like the reason it's a goal is because you can't do it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it requires them to, on some level, kind of participate in the world as it exists.
I think people have different levels of skill when they come to role-playing games.
Yeah.
And that the more skilled players typically expect to build some kind of story, and so they come with a little bit of story already built in, and they have a background to some kind of degree, and you can get that kind of solicitation, you can get that kind of feedback out of them. Mm-hmm. But for new players, it's a lot harder because they're really not familiar with how to tell a story or what a character is even really. And so they have an idea of who they are and that this is a game, but they have some inherent sort of limitations to getting all the way there. And you can't really just tell them a story and get them to buy into it the same way. So I have this technique that I use because when I started out, you were supposed to create a 0-level character and then play that for a little while and figure out what kind of style of play you preferred. And maybe you got lucky and you rolled really well on trying to do an attack, and so that becomes your signature move. You know?
Flail!
Yeah. So, you know, you were expected to go through that kind of process, and so I had worked through that 0-level process so many times that I've got some sort of standards. Excuse me. Sort of standard setting, low level, low impact, short encounters. For different kinds of players and or different kinds of characters rather. And so for new players, I usually just try and get, what is your alignment? And you can spend a good 20 minutes with a new player just explaining alignment to them and blowing their mind, which is awesome. It's a great experience. And then class, you know, if you've got alignment in class, you can pretty much build like a 30 minutes day in the life of this alignment in class. Like, are you an evil fighter, a good fighter, a mercenary kind of neutral fighter? And from there, you can kind of see like the fighter down on his luck, maybe fighting for his meal against a large rat. That's a great encounter. There's so much pathos built into that something has to come out of it. Either they get beat by the rat and they'll never live that one down. They'll be following their character around for years, right? Or they get that rat and they however they get it, and you make it enough of a struggle, risk and reward, and that kind of thing sticks with you and gives you a core identity. And then from there, you can start to build up those layers. And I think so. But in doing that, it's important to remember for your lower skill players that you have to build in those limitations into the encounters. They're not going to have an understanding of a political encounter with a whole bunch of different factions and moving parts, or a really complicated trap or a magical mystery. Like, they don't know anything about the magic system. How are they going to know to detect evil and good? Because then you will know that it wasn't evil or good, so it must have been neutral, and that's how you caught him.
That's just a person.
That's some dude. So the way I've always looked at it is because I personally prefer more story and character driven than class, and so I know I've had a lot of players who are frustrated by it, but I'm like, hey, it's not just her. There's other people too.
but
And
I'm
I'm like,
really frustrated with
let's
it.
write a story together first. Don't worry about class. Don't worry about race. We'll come with that. And we'll come to that as we write the story. So like, where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Are they still around? And we go through this questionnaire as we write this story. And with that, then I get to help building the world because, oh, you want to really focus that your mom was a baker? All right. I don't know why, but now her bakery is known throughout this town because she was the best baker. Cool. And now I have a piece that is important for your character that you can bring to the other characters because don't worry, guys. I know we don't have any food, but my mom got us. And you can build from there. So, okay.
That's like the dungeon world thing, right? They have what is it? It's not traits. It's like bonds. You have to claim a bond, and it has to be with other players in the group. And
yes, okay, I know what you're talking about.
I have
Aspects
done
of your
that.
characters
Yes.
that are built off of that dynamic, and so it's kind of like storytelling. I think Spark has some of that too, where it's actually interactions between the players that help them define their identities because they have to pick something about the other player's character, which is easier for some reason to define somebody else's situation than it is your own. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really good way of building a party dynamic, and it allows everyone to interact with not just each other, but also the world. So I bring up Fate again because if you haven't, you said you're just getting into Fate.
Well, I mean, I've spent about the last. I'm trying to master Fate.
Okay.
I have not mastered Fate.
I
Okay.
have
I
not
can quote
mastered
you
Fate yet.
Hundreds of second edition rolls, hundreds of them.
But not
But
mastered.
from Fate, I can maybe quote, a good 30 or 50 rolls.
That's a lot of
I've
rules.
played it several times.
That's probably more than I can quote
Yeah, I
of
don't
anything I'm currently
Learn
running.
systems in that level of detail.
I don't.
I know what they do. I don't quote things.
I hate getting headed off by a rules lawyer in the middle of play. It's like
See?
my worst nightmare.
I've had some people who try that, and I say, well, I'm gonna rule on this right now. Look it up, and we're moving on.
Too bad.
This is how it works today.
I'm God
In the
right now.
future, we can make some adjustments, but right now, moving on.
I bring up Fate because their campaign setting, I think it is, or the campaign builder, or is it the city builder? Maybe I'm thinking something else.
I haven't quite mastered it.
Okay. Okay.
They have a city builder.
It's so you know how you have a character.
Uh-huh.
So in Fate, just so everyone's aware, you have a character. You also have what are the aspects?
Uh-huh.
And so you have your core aspect, which is like who you would define yourself as. Like Ethan would be devilishly handsome rogue.
Thank you.
Sharon would be bare knuckle brawler. So you have these core traits, which then you could tap or invoke at a later point to get a bonus or do something on the scene. You also get more traits as the game progresses. So the city builder is effectively the world building is we all come together and make the city or the game world that we're going to play in. So we name it, we decide what our core attribute of the city is, and then we have different levels and different traits we could then put on the city, like stinky docks. Cool, now our city, Tacoma, has stinky docks. And we can now tag that for different kinds of things.
It also has stinky rest of town.
Whoa.
To be absolutely clear.
We would just call it the aroma. But
I think that concept is paper mill.
Pretty
much blankets.
Paper mill, done. Well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go search for something to burn at the paper mill. And now it then allows people to tag different aspects of the town to then interact with. And it's a really nice way of getting everyone on board with the world building.
Yeah. I had and this is a much more relevant tangent, and it's it's much shorter, so this is not going to be a problem. I was part of a process of something very similar to that never panned out, and it made me very sad. It was a game system specifically designed for world building
Okay.
that a friend of mine, Justin, put together in which all of the players took the mantles of various different gods that you completely made up. You got to pick like your domains and whatever you were about. And then it was, I don't remember if it was completely made by him or if it was sort of like hacked out of something else, but there were 3 main phases of play. There's the construction of the geography, which is like massive prehistory. There's prehistory, in which all of the turns are a bit shorter. They're a fair amount shorter, and that's like kind of seeding all of the various different species of people and putting them into like diasporas, filling out the map. And then the last one would be like the Age of History, in which as gods, the group of players all come together and push for historical events happening. And then the plan for all of this was to have that turn into a campaign setting after we had put it all together.
Tight. How'd that
That's
go?
really interesting.
The game was really fun.
Okay.
We never got to turn it into a campaign setting.
Sad.
Did you guys
That's-
keep notes?
It still exists. We have it, and we have all of the gods that we played. And I know that specifically Paladin and I, who is my roommate and has been on here a few times, we're both part of that game, and we pull the gods that we played and some of the other ones from that game and just kind of plug them into our settings, because why not? It's a big multiverse. There are echoes.
Blarlack, by the way, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please let us know on the Discord, and we'll go into more detail on it.
I'll apologize a lot.
You might.
I will.
You will.
For what?
Not answering the question very good.
I think we answered the question.
Well, I do want to
decently.
answer one more time, just to reiterate on what you've got and my new favorite role-playing game in the world. I mean, really, Ben Robbins, the Lame Mage Productions, created Microscope probably, it was a while back, actually, 8 years ago or something. And this little tiny book is like, it's almost exactly what you described, except there are no phases. And instead of focusing everything on one map, you also get a timeline.
That's fun.
Which, yeah. So, I mean, imagine that you could do the same thing with your map as you're doing, tag different aspects on a geography, but then also do that, tag different aspects in a history,
Okay.
and then mapping that history onto that geography between those aspects, and then playing a
World be
game
built.
world in it. Yeah. Allowing players to create different periods and epochs in time, events and scenes, questions that they have about those events. And then in the scenes, they role play out why, the answers to their questions.
Hang on, Hellcat. That's my camera. I'm gonna try and go to Petra into doing a thing with me after the show. So just put a pin in that.
Working on it.
So,
So next week, I don't even remember what next week is.
yeah, we do have it
The
scheduled
13th.
already.
What is it?
It's your thing.
But it's a thing.
I think it's Takanoko.
No.
Yeah.
Nah.
Oh.
Sharon
No,
says no.
Takanoka's in March. Yeah, Takanoka's
Okay.
second Thursday in March. This is.
Oh, this
we're
is
doing
this
two
is
two-player games.
load game.
Because it's on the 13th.
That's right.
It's as close to Valentine's Day as we got.
We all forgot when Valentine's
Yeah.
Day was.
We looked at the availability. It's like, why is nobody?
Nobody's
Oh,
available
yeah,
this
that's
day.
Right. That's right. Don't worry, I'll be here.
Yeah, next week's gonna be 2-player games.
Don't look at me. I had to drop for completely non-Valentine's reasons.
Oh, it's okay.
I know.
It's all fine. But I hope your Valentine's Day goes well.
I don't remember when it is. I don't remember what date. Is it the 14th?
It's the 14th. We were
Okay.
Ethan. We just talked about this.
Right.
I'll send you.
It's okay.
My memory is very bad. I've established this. I front-loaded the show.
That's true. You did,
I can't
you
be
did say
blamed.
that.
Like
I'll
that
send you a
seems
Valentine
sick.
that has a chocolate piece in it or
And
something.
the date on it.
And the date. Never forget. It'll be in red dripping crayon. It'll be great. It'll look fine. Never forget.
I won't. I will keep it on my person. Most of my jackets have breast pockets.
So, how much does history play in, since you brought it up with Microscope, which I'm more interested to see, not that there's a physical copy.
Mm.
But how much does history and or past events play into creating a campaign for you guys? Do you bring up the fact that 100 years ago, this city was founded by King whoever, even if it's not really all that relevant. If it's history that people want to know, how deep are you going when you create the campaign? In case somebody asks about who founded this city 100 years ago.
Right.
Not
Right.
terribly.
I mean,
Cool. Thanks.
No, I
Succinct.
don't. Like I leave so much empty space so that I can always put something there if I need it for story reasons. If I want to develop a story more, or if a player gets really interested in it, then I can build something that'll really like speak to what their character's been doing so far. So I leave as much empty space in my world building as possible, because I can always put stuff there. But once it's there, you can't take it out.
Yeah.
So I leave the space.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I like to go a little heavier with it just because I think, especially when I'm doing like, anything other than the Star Wars game I'm running right now, which I don't get to have that much fun with. Everything other than that, I really like to make it feel like this world is old, it was here before you, and it will be here after you. So a lot of the times it'll, like through conversation that they have, because I play with mostly theater people, so they like to kind of go into the little minute NPC conversations, and I have fun with it, so it's fine. Like tidbits of history will come up or whatnot. And also just, it helps me evoke imagery of places a lot. And kind of give a sense of emotion. Like if I'm saying that this, great plateau to the north of the area these players have been in this whole time has been locked off by the giants who live in the mountain range bordering it for over a century, and this is the first time they're letting travelers through, it does set a certain mise en scène, as it were. And a certain...
Can you say that again?
Mise en scène.
I like it.
Thanks.
I don't know what it means, but I like it.
It gives a certain energy to the scene of...
Sense of place.
It's the sense of place.
Mise en scène.
Yeah.
It's a scenography term.
It is.
Hellcat, we will answer that after they tell me what they think about time things.
so, timing things.
Oh, timing things, yeah. And you can kind of go into this big dusty place, and you've already gotten a certain amount of emotion, and you've instilled your players with just a little bit of wonder, at least in theory. A little twinkle in their eyes. And then they get that very strong sense of, we as characters are the first people from our backgrounds in ages to have seen any of this. We are rediscovering history that has been lost. And that's just kind of an exciting feeling to give somebody, and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to pass that ball back to you.
Okay, and I'm going to take it and go back to the map.
Triple.
So one of the reasons I brought this map here, because this is how I got sucked into Dungeons and Dragons. My older brother and I had played on graph paper. He had drawn up these mazes. It was kind of like Pac-Man mazes for Doom. And there were these little red boxes that I would have to cross in the maze, and those would be ogres. And he'd roll a dice and tell me, oh, you rolled a 4. Nope, you're dead. Go back to the beginning of the maze. No, you rolled a 6. Okay, you beat that ogre. You get to go past the red
That does
square,
sound
right?
like my childhood D&D games quite a bit.
Keep it simple, stupid.
This was before they published. I mean, it was the late 70s. So
Right.
There weren't really role playing games for us to play, and that was the closest we got. There weren't even video games for us to play. That was the closest we got. We were playing war with pencils and flick the pencils at people. But anyway, then I saw this, the Darlene map. This is amazing. This is back in the day when they used to make these 3-color prints by cutting out little stencils that were shaped like the mountains, and then put the mountains right on a white sheet of paper, and then take a picture of it with the grid actually being an actual wire grid, just layered down on top of this thing. It's beautiful. It's so many colors and all of these amazing words. But okay, so imagine 10,000 years ago on the plains of Pesh, a massive battle reigned between the Lords of Law and the Queen of Chaos. They decimated the area, constructed a massive desert, laid waste to the countryside for miles. And then finally, as Mishka, the wolf spider, was struck by the rod of law, and banished. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the Wind Dukes of Akka won the war of law and chaos. They constructed a massive mausoleum the size of the entire plain of Greyhawk.
That's huge.
A massive mausoleum to honor their dead.
There's a lot of dead people.
And it became buried in antiquity. Fast forward thousands of years ago, two great civilizations separated by a small mountain range have come into direct conflict with each other, and they've come to a stalemate for hundreds of years, and they finally decided on mutual destruction. And the invoked devastation and the rain of colorless fire again wipes out hundreds of miles of countryside. As these two civilizations are growing, they have spread out to the point where they discover the tombs, and it becomes fashionable for the Sul Arcana mages to begin burying their wealthy in these beautiful ancient ruins for these strange people that they had no knowledge of where they'd come from. But it was obviously very sad and very beautiful culture, so they tried to honor it by constructing their own mausoleums on top of the ancient ruins from the 10,000-year-old war. And then they blew themselves up and they disappeared. And their graves on top of the other mausoleums sat for hundreds of years. 350 years ago, in a small hamlet called Greyhawk, there was a mage by the name of Zagig Irgarn, and he and a group of his friends decided to go venturing out into the mausoleums in the hills nearby, and they discovered treasures beyond their wildest dreams. And they brought them back to Greyhawk, and suddenly Greyhawk became a Wild West frontier town. All the wealth from the tombs drew adventurers from around the world, growing empires in the theocracy and in the Great Kingdom, as well as young kingdoms in Voluna and Ferianti and Neurons, began to send their elites to this centrally located city between those two vast geographic areas connected by this narrow land bridge. An economic center to the world. Greyhawk became, within the last 10 years.
So yes, history is important then.
Well, so what I'm trying to describe to you, right? So I've just thrown out all of these hooks.
Yeah.
And they're just interesting words, but they obviously have meaning to me.
Yeah.
And that creates that sense of mystery, and it also demonstrates to the other players, I did my homework.
Yeah, you know things, and now
I
I'm
want you to
interested
give me a
about
little
this.
bit of a benefit of the doubt. And once they've got that sense of mystery and they're giving you a benefit of the doubt, then you've created that sense of suspension of disbelief, and you're in a role-playing game, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
I think one of the kindest deceptions you can pull on another person is convincing them that you, as a game master, know what the hell you're talking about.
Right. And it is a skill.
It is a skill.
Like, I botched a couple of those. The grognards will be pissed off at me later. But
Well, we didn't know, and we're around the table, so it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Yeah,
if I can
lost
reproduce
me.
it consistently,
That
that is the trick.
that whole thing lost me completely.
None of those stories were gripping.
No, and it's the words. It is 100% the words. If you're gonna use words that I don't know, use one, maybe two. At 3, that's it. I can't deal with that anymore, and it becomes brain mush.
Okay.
So either I need more context for what things are, because that did not impart to me a great sense of mystery about the world and things to discover and stuff happening. That told me that I actually don't want to play this game because I'm gonna get bludgeoned with jargon every time, and that's not appealing to me, and it didn't translate. You're right. It does convey that you know a lot about the world and that there is a lot here, but it didn't. And this is probably just me as an individual, not like a general thing, but it did not spark my interest at all. whatever the opposite of interest is.
But you don't typically
That's what
play with a
happened.
history.
I don't GM with a history
Okay.
because people who GM for me do tend to put those things in there.
Uh-huh.
And then I honestly play in very much the same way. Like if there's something that stands out to me, then I will pursue that.
Mhm.
The rest of it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like we have a limited amount of table time, and I'm one person
Right.
piloting one other person, and so like we can only have a limited scope. Otherwise, it all just kind of falls apart for me.
Yeah.
I also don't do very well with a very long term goal. If it's like this is your level 20 goal, then I don't care because I'm level 2. You know, I need something that I can reach at level 4.
Mhm.
And then you can pull me along like that forever, but I need something immediate and actionable.
Mhm.
And history can sometimes provide that, but
Oh,
I think
no.
that it's easy to overdo, especially for me.
That particular run through there, that is an opening exposition for a campaign.
Oh yeah.
That is not some way that you would ever play a role-playing game. Like, the only reason I would ever tell that story is if somebody said, so what is your campaign about? 10,000 years ago.
That's somebody else's fault at that point.
I am a squirrel. That's what it is.
She's definitely a squirrel. Okay.
I'm actually a magpie, but
That's also true.
tomato.
Most important question on everyone's mind. Hexes or squares?
Squares for indoors, hexes for outdoors.
As it should be in the original.
Squares for person to person, hexes for larger scale travel. And that could be something like this, or that could be like vehicle travel. But yeah, that's how I like to stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's a lot more turning you do with a car than like on your legs. You have a lot more individual.
Do you not turn on your legs?
No, I do turn on my legs, but there's also a lot more like point-to-point mobility walking around on 2 legs than there is in a forward-moving swivel vehicle that I think hexes help represent a little better.
That makes sense.
That's just preference.
In
though.
the Forgotten Realms box set, the original one that they published in 2nd edition D&D, they came in the box set with a clear sheet of plastic with the hexes on the clear sheet.
Thanks.
So that you could have these beautiful, full color, regular sort of pictorial maps. And then if you wanted hexes,
Put it on there.
what, the hex grid isn't perfectly aligned the way you want it to do the measurement? How's that?
Yeah.
And like, that was so brilliant. So I've been stuck on rulers ever since.
That's fair.
Yeah, I really prefer rulers.
So then the follow-up question is, do you use maps or no maps? Hellcat's wondering.
Yeah. Do you mean maps like this or
Like world maps or like combat
yeah?
mini maps? Because I don't do combat mini maps unless the terrain matters. Like if I've built an encounter where you can do neat things with the terrain, or where numbers matter, like you need to know how far apart things are, then I will give you a map. But for the most part, I don't, because I find it just bogs everything down.
Yeah, I think similar point. It depends on how like cinematic an encounter is supposed to be. Whether it's like this is an actual combat puzzle that I'm putting in front of you because I think it will be an enjoyable thing for you to figure out within the tactical like movement and placement rules, or if it's like you're running through a crowded street chasing after somebody who's cut your purse the other direction and you need to like run after them and tackle them. Maybe you get in a fight and things start to clear up. That's much more of a theater of the mind thing for me and my style than it is like a tactics.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
There's 2 main things on maps I think that are really problematic. The first one is inevitably there will be that player who's like, okay, but I'm gonna run in this direction for 4 minutes, and it's completely off of the map. So now they've gone outside of the scope of play, but you have to keep track of them moving around, even though there's no mechanic for that because they're not on the map anymore.
Yeah.
So you got to do round counting and measuring how many yards off the map they were, and if they stop or do something, then it can be a mess. It can be just
That does not sound fun at all. I just
it's horrible.
you're off. Let me know when you come back.
That's,
Yeah,
that's what I was
yeah.
saying. Like I'm
Yeah.
lazy. I'll just be like, no, you just whenever you're ready. Whatever
You
whatever you're
escaped.
doing, I'll tell you when you come back.
You will return when it is dramatically appropriate.
Yep.
Yep.
Right? On the other hand, the other thing that I don't like about maps that is really difficult is once you've written it down in a map and you've shown it to the players, it's fixed.
Yeah.
You completely lose all of your credibility and they lose all of their suspension of disbelief if you have to change the map. One of the worst things about the old maps in D&D is that they would put the secret doors right there. And so if you ever showed the players the map, then they knew their secret door. Even if they got a glimpse of it as they were passing by your GM screen, then the whole mystery of the adventure was screwed by that one, the secret door being revealed.
I think, in theory, if I may, I think an interesting way to, and this is about world building, so it's fine. An interesting way to kind of deal with that, both for the maps thing and also for also world building, but like your players trying to goad information out of you, is make it all within the setting. Like, this is a map that somebody drew within this world based on the information they could find in atlases and on other maps that has been given. So this is all of the information that they have readily at their person, but there are blanks that need to be filled that it, makes sense would be empty because I didn't do an entire hex grid comb of the whole forest to figure out everything was in there. I just know that this is where this forest is, and there's a camp right over here where a bunch of hunters hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it really depends on the system, because certain systems, I do feel like the D20 systems, Pathfinder, D&D, except all the D&Ds really do. I like to have the map because so many things are spelled out in those type of words. So you move 30 feet, but also a lot of times you move 6 squares. Okay, well. And so having, especially for combat interactions.
Wait, is that a 5-foot square or a 10-foot square?
That
a
honestly,
6-foot square, dog.
a significant proportion of the impetus for me to remove combat maps from my table was people kept asking me what scale we were on. It's always 5.
Yeah.
It's always 5.
People are weird.
Yep.
So
The Edition Wars, it was evil. It was very evil.
So games like that, that's where I want the tactical map. But other games where combat isn't the main thing, so the Ars Magica, the World of Darkness, the Fate, I don't need a map because it's you can move over there-ish.
Okay, but so I approach role-playing games and entertaining in a role-playing game as a learning experience. There's a lot of learning that goes on in role-playing, and even when you're playing a story game, you're learning the language, the words to use that are unique to the setting. And that is the part that you're learning. Those touch points allow you to construct the narrative out. And so I think it's a learning process anytime you're playing a role-playing game. And so in that sense, there are lots of different ways that people learn. And so I think it's very important that as you're presenting and you're entertaining and you want to get that engagement from your players, that you meet them on those levels. And it also helps, again, to get that buy-in if it's obvious that you've done a little bit of homework.
Yeah.
So if you've drawn a beautiful piece of art, then you've got to show it off, and your players are going to be impressed by that, and it's going to give them something visually to be able to relate to the world and think about in their mind's eye, in that theater of the mind's eye. So even if you don't use the map, maps are still really important because they give that visual stimulus. A lot of the reason that Dungeons and Dragons was so successful was because of the amazing art that was on there. There's amazing artists like Earl Otis and other great people who did these arts. And one of the greatest, most fun modules that came out of the old era was this amazing expedition to the Barrier Peaks. And the greatest thing about it was it was one of those first-time sci-fi games. So they hadn't quite come out with Gamma World when this was originally published as a tournament module. This is sort of lead-in to Gamma World, and there's hints in it in the lore. You can look it up. It's the SS Beagle. It's a pretty amazing story. But aliens from outer Earth. But this book is like such a huge innovation because each one of the encounters is numbered, and each one comes with its own view. So you get this, like, okay, so you come to a metal door. There are a series of squares that are lit on the edge of the door. What do you do? Now, when the players first see this, they're like, that's a weird looking door.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't even look like fantasy door. But they're trying to play a fantasy character. This is a little bit more fantasy style. That's very dungeon-esque. But then there's this iris opening, and then they're like, what's going on here? And by encounter 3, now they're already starting to see things that they... But then it goes right straight. But, I mean, there's just amazing art in here, and each one of these situations is very relatable, and it also draws you into the event and gives them some way of visually seeing these sort of things.
I definitely
so this
use
isn't
art.
even really a map. But in that sense, it is just as useful as a map because it's a visual input that allows them in their mind to visualize the world you're trying to get them to do in there. The other thing I do is sound effects. I think it's both important to have some kind of music occasionally for certain events, maybe not all of the time, but I love pre-recording like monster noises or explosions or tavern song or something interesting that you can then just sort of surprise the players with if they're not expecting it. All of a sudden there's a sound, and then that really sticks.
Hitting the players with all the senses you can, I found makes for the most enjoyable games. And it's like visual. Again, I don't use maps for those type of games, but I do comb for pictures. Like, this is what they look like. Here's the type of things you're going to be experiencing. Here's a picture of the setup. Like you said, the sounds. Get some random sounds in there so you can have some music playing as they're doing whatever. I'll go as far as to cook certain food so that you'll have this smell and like, oh, you guys go to this inn. They're known for their stews. It's a little off. Or it's a little different, so I'll make a stew and then just have giant like pieces of bread to go with it so that the stew's there. They get their food. Now they're enjoying the food while the tavern sounds are playing. There's a picture somewhere of like the barkeep, and now they have all their senses because now they're also touching the dice, even if they're not rolling anything. Or if I say, yeah, roll a sense motive. All right, bartender's still cool. Don't worry about it. So now they've got the tactile sense. They've got the olfactory. They've got the taste if they're eating. So they have all of it. Now this experience has become, oh, this is a real big thing. This is okay. I'm in this tavern. This is going on. And that's just a tavern. That's not traveling with your garbage bread and your hard cheese and salami. And I'm big on food, by the way.
Maybe they're eating that stew and they're thinking there is no way there were currants or whatever is in the stew, in that part of that story. But they're willing to ignore that because you went through the trouble of making them.
Exactly.
And that's awesome.
It's all about the experience for me and the players, and hopefully everyone's bringing something to the table that like really. What, you bringing something to the table, Sharon? Oh, okay, yes, I do. Whoa, okay. So the last time I did food, my character is based off of a character from an anime. He's a half dragon / lizard person. Really loves cheese, and so. Have you seen it?
No, but a whole lot of inside jokes just to click.
And so I, for the character's meal, I brought out a charcuterie with a bunch of different cheeses, a bunch of different meats. I acted in character the entire time as I was serving everyone, talking about how amazing this new invention called cheese is and how no one ever told the lizard people about this. What is wrong? Like, this is amazing. And then, what was it, iced cream? Oh, mind-blowing, because I'm a lizard. And so we don't have things like ice cream and cheese because we eat meat. And so like doing all this type of things, as we like broke bread and hung out, and then like one of the other characters was having a sad moment for some reason, so we brought out this little bottle of special wine he was saving, and we all got to share this meal and tell stories around the campfire, going, we've messed up because we're deep in hell, messing with Belial.
Got that cheese.
Got that cheese.
Got that cheese.
Don't you worry, that cheese is good. And it made, like, I still think about it like, man, that was a really good moment of role playing and storytelling. We all went around and toasted with our wine. It brought everyone into the world more than, all right, cool, we're hanging out, we're camping. We're camping.
Yeah.
That's how we do.
I got first watch.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
And yes, they got garbage bread.
My other example here
Yeah.
I brought with me. So again, I like to show my players, I like to show up to game with something new that is going to be visual or tactile. Or so my players were coming up against a session where I knew that they were going to be involved in gambling.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this old game called Three Dragon Ante. And so I was like, well, I could just use a Three Dragon Ante deck, but I want something that looks like it literally came out of a rogue's backpack.
Yeah.
And so I cut up a whole bunch of these printed off manila folders, and they just have like, they're so distressed when they come off. They didn't print very well.
I was going to say, did you weather them, or did they just come that way?
They've definitely weathered more, but they sort of distressed them before I showed up with them, and they already printed so poorly.
That looks
That
really
just-
good.
That's
really
nice.
Yeah.
They're like junk cards you'd find in the bottom of a tackle box somewhere. and so I've played many a great set of games with these, or with other dice that are a little bit more worn than the typical set of dice as gaming dice in the game. I like to do that too, and that's another thing that I do. I like games within games. I think if you can get players to step out of their player body and then be in a character body and then step out of their character body to play another character body, then you have definitely pushed them way through the first wall, not even the fourth wall, and they come right back out on the
There are
other
no
side of
walls
the
anymore.
fourth.
All of the
They're all
walls are
gone?
gone.
Right.
Play reception. There's so many games going on.
We've blown up the house.
And the dragon.
All three.
That poor dragon.
That's not where that goes.
I also really like games within the game because it helps, again, build that world where they're not just always adventuring. That's not what people do, or they're not always embroiled in political intrigue. They're going to hang out sometimes and play the equivalent of chess. They're going to hang out and play dice. They're going to hang out and play cards. So if you make a player or an NPC or somebody who does that type of thing, it then adds that layer of realism for the players. Like, hey, look, we're just hanging out. You want to get through? Beat me at dice. We'll see how this goes. It's like, oh, now you've introduced yet another game for them that is not just, will I roll intimidate, let me through. It's like, no. Snake eyes. Let's see what we got. It adds so much more to the world than just telling somebody to roll a stat or convince me to let you in.
One of the things I love about this game in particular is that they came out with a supplement to it that said, okay, so this is a game that is supposed to exist in the world, so your characters can play it, and you can play it. But if you're playing it with your character, then we're going to let your character use their special abilities in the game, so you get to actually say, well, I've got a feat that allows me to draw 3 cards. Use it once per short rest.
Guess what? Oh, well, crap. You got this.
Yeah, I like that.
I do too. I really enjoy games that start to incorporate. I enjoy systems that start to incorporate games like that into the rules of the system to hopefully encourage players to then play that game.
And I think that's the biggest problem I've got right now with 5th edition. They started out at the basic and expert level, but they haven't really mastered their selves.
It's
5th edition.
in 5th edition?
The 5th edition people that are writing the 5th edition haven't really written a master's level of 5th edition, because there's really no domain rules. There's really no character progressions in terms of retainers has been very limited. They promise that they're expanding in those areas, and there will be better stuff coming out. And I'm excited to see what.
No, you leave them out. We're going over it, wherever the heck they are.
Go on.
He's got things pulled out. We're going to talk about them. I don't know what they are.
Well, you keep going. You're talking about retainers.
Oh yeah. You know, I think they don't go to the fully into the master's level. There also isn't really yet written a 5th edition version of Chainmail. And I think that they need a tabletop board game to go along with Dungeons and Dragons, because you can't have individual character level combats that are at that scale that are really going to be interesting from a strategic point of view. And, you know, when we talk about game theory, that BSN model, you know, strategic as opposed to tactical is really important for a fully fleshed out experience.
Yeah. I think that, you know, there are like obviously like third party people putting out that kind of stuff for 5th edition, but I think I would be very interested to see what Wizards actually did with it.
I mean, if they're going to complete a complete D&D, that they should include that stuff.
For 3.5, wasn't that the Heroes of Battle, where they had the larger scale combat? Or do you remember, was that the
I
one?
don't know if it was called Heroes of Battle.
Okay. I'm trying to remember what, because I remember seeing all right, so this is how you command a whole troop of people, and this is all of these effects. That's what you're talking about for Chainmail, right?
Yeah, Chainmail, I think, was a separate game, although it was billed as the war game for Dungeons & Dragons, but I think it was the 2nd edition, or in that era. I don't think it was 3rd edition. I think in 3rd edition they came out with something called Greyhawk Wars, which was an attempt by TSR to create basically, or Wizards of the Coast at the time, I'm not sure who published it, but to create one of those Avalon Hill sort of like cardboard counter tabletop war games, which was really pretty cool, I thought. They had some interesting things in there, and it was a lot simpler, and it was more of a campaign game like Risk sort of style, or Axis and Allies sort of thing. But what was I going to say after that? There is something that came out. It's not Chain. Oh, no. In Beckme. So in the Beckme, they had. Oh, what was it called? So you could have tabletop combat. It wasn't called Chainmail. It was the battle system. I think it was just called battle system. Okay. Yeah, in companion level. And they came out with the battle system, and basically there was a way to construct units where you could assign points to them, and so you could balance encounters with equal numbers of points. And so in some sense kind of off of the Warhammer model, but also very much pen and paper, no module, or no map or miniatures or anything needed to make it work. It's pretty interesting stuff.
You pulled these out.
I did.
Let's rewind time.
Rewinding time. We were talking about maps. And just to give a tactile physical example of the kind of maps I actually use, this is just for me. My players never saw it. I think Paladin, my roommate, might have after we had cleared this whole little section just to see it. And it's got... Paladin. That's his real birth name, I swear on my life.
That's amazing.
I think I met him, maybe?
I think you have.
I think so.
I don't know.
I still shake my fist.
Yeah. And it's got all of the information I needed for this little dungeon crawl that I was putting them through, which included, I've got a big ol', on the far side of that back chamber, there's a large mosaic depicting some historical event, which is important to the campaign, and I know, whatever. I know stuff about it. I don't need to get into that.
You don't need to know plans.
They never saw this. I had just like a dry erase board that I, and it's on grid paper, so I know the exact lengths and everything. So I just copied the outline of the room and gave them what they could see from here. They didn't know, necessarily that this switch, which I have listed on this big ol' index of how things go, that happens to be controlling the chandeliers. And if they should want to, they could drop the chandeliers. And I've got a little check mark over here when I know that they have done that. So it's not a relevant thing anymore. And this, there's a little secret chamber behind a tapestry over here. They don't have that information, but I have it on my personal map so that I know exactly where it is and I can keep track of what people have and haven't done. more secrets on there.
Yeah.
Nobody saw it but me, but it was very helpful as a DM to have my own little secret map.
What I've learned so far is that next time, for the next side quest, I need to bring my notes and props and things that I use.
I just had this.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's really good to have it. It looks really good, and I need to step my game up. Next time I'll bring food too.
Next time
like
bring
what?
food.
So this,
I mean, if you want to bring food,
I'll come back.
food is my jam.
This is also another great way to get your players involved in the game when you make all of their adversaries edible. They love that.
Yeah.
Every time I do that, it seems that's when the players are like, "Oh, I'm going to start counting coup, so I'm going to save all of them." I'm like, but you were supposed to eat them and enjoy them. They're like, "Nah, look how many I have lined up." Like, all right then, I guess.
I'm trying to incentivize that in the 5th edition game I'm running right now, because I do something where all of my like custom and like boss monsters I have written out on cue cards.
Okay.
And whoever gets the killing blow or does something relevant to it, I will give them that cue card to keep. Because since I'm trying to help sell their own like dynamic that they have with each other, because they're trying to start up like a proper legal, all paperwork done adventuring company. So there's that sort of like friendly coworker competition that I'm trying to incentivize to them by giving them like physical things that they have, noting like how well they're doing or whatnot.
Okay.
That's that and handwritten letters from characters are as close as I get to props most of the time.
I do that. I do that a lot. I'm building my collection of wax seals.
Ooh.
So I can do more stuff. Because I like props a lot. I like the physical, tangible things. I've got a weird music box that I got to use. I was really excited about that.
Did you get to use it?
I did get to use it, yeah.
Tight.
And it was nice. And
It's
yeah,
real
just
creepy.
like little things like that you can give somebody and like they can hold it and then they get to keep it. Like for the game. Somebody got like a weird necklace as well.
It was from the
recently.
librarian. and
Yeah,
it was
yeah. They got a memento. They can summon Hell's librarian one time.
Ooh.
But it's like this really sweet bronzed hand.
Because it's a hand with like an
this
eye on
with
it
an
that
eye
I've
in the
had.
center.
And
It's like,
Wow.
all right, that's intense, but
yeah, and it was just like it was a gift that somebody gave me that so I want it back, but as a prop, it's like no, you like the librarian hands you this thing, and
it makes the games feel so much cooler when you have the thing. It's something me and a lot of the people I play with have started doing is I'm going to make my weapon prop, or if I play a lot of bards. And so, oh look, I have the instrument that I have with me. I can't play it, but I have it. Ooh, look, it's a flute. Look, it's a guitar. And so being able to just be like, oh, hey, 1 second, guys, pull out a guitar. And they're like, oh, all right, music's going down, boys.
if Daniel pulls out a jawbone, I will be so happy.
The guy we play with is playing a jawbone.
Yep.
Wow.
I don't know how that exactly works yet, but I know it's an old school instrument.
I looked up so many videos of jawbone playing because I was like, I need to know what this is because I've never heard of this before. It's like his
Blow
character's
through it?
no, it's percussion. It's a percussion instrument, and so like the entire jawbone, or sometimes half of the jawbone, and it's dried so the teeth they rattle when you hit it. And then you can also like hit different parts of the jawbone to make different tones.
That makes sense.
It is so cool.
Isn't it creepy?
That's the coolest instrument I've ever heard of. I don't know.
Let me tell you about amplified cactus.
That's a thing.
Whoa.
Yeah, somebody put sensors on a cactus and tapped it, and it made its way into some weird music thing. So it's actually an instrument now.
That's
Amplified
so
cactus.
good.
Amplified cactus.
I mean, it's just as weird to me as like the people playing the saw.
That's pretty weird.
There's
Like,
but there's a certain of like desensitization you get to like saws and washboards, which that's just folk music. That's normal.
that's a Saturday night down at the barn.
Folk music is just chores to you?
No, but you got like washboards and
Jugs,
stand-up washboard bass, twang twang,
which are tight.
tight as hell.
All right.
Yeah, you're right. So you got washboard, you got jugs, you got the saw.
You got the stand-up washboard base.
I don't wanna say anything because like
That
I
is
just
not.
don't know.
I'm sorry, Fadior. That is not us.
That was not us.
That is not us at all. So, in
But
case
if
you weren't
would like
here,
to know.
No.
I would be any one of those people for the night, just for fun.
I'll be James Durham.
Who
are you?
I'm gonna take Vanessa.
Okay.
Damn it! I wanted to be Vanessa.
Do you want Vanessa?
I
That's
do.
fine. I'm gonna take Luca.
Actually, I think it's updated, but for Monday.
Yeah, it's Mondays.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh,
Yep.
spoilers.
The real James says yes. By the way, everyone, I didn't say it because I'm a jerk, but our technical director today is none other than James himself. So thank you, James, for doing work.
We love you.
So, Fadior, I'm me, Bryce.
I'm Ethan. That's me.
Oh, Petra Wilson.
You got
And that one.
James looks the same.
It's true.
Though.
It's true. Pretty much the same person. Like, could be twins. I'm hoping that was
James even laughed at that.
a snort of good faith.
Is breaking the tech on a bingo card? Because it should be.
You'll know when the show's over. You will know.
We should
That's
definitely add breaking the tech to bingo.
Yeah, I don't know. I need a bingo card, apparently.
I don't know where you get bingo cards.
That
one.
There's a link.
Thank you, AK.
You're the best, AK.
That one.
Oh, that one.
Oh.
So.
It adds to my air of mystery.
Awesome. That one.
Yep.
So I got some other questions because it's what we're here to do.
In
Talk
theory.
about
Hey,
things.
bingo
theory.
cards.
Hit me up.
Yay!
Yay!
Thanks, Keen.
You hero.
So this is one that I had some questions on. So when you guys are designing worlds and the settings, do you guys use minority groups? And if you do, like what kind of roles and how does your world interact with minorities?
Guess I'm going first again.
Sounds good.
I do, assuming you mean real world minority groups.
Just any, because anything can become a minority depending on the world, I guess.
Yeah, but
yeah,
specifically in
Let's go
reference to
with
like
real world.
real world minority groups, I do use them, and they're part of the world, and they're hanging out. We're hanging out because I'm coming out as like a bisexual person to give context to this question, where this is a fantasy, and there are great and terrible evils, but I don't want to. I want to sit around a table with my friends and go like depose an evil emperor or cut off a demon king's head. I don't want to sit around a table with my friends for fun and deal with the weird bullshit homophobia that I have to deal with in the real world anyway.
Yeah.
That's not something that I want to do for fun.
Yeah.
So I've got, various all sorts of people that I try and actively represent in the world that I try and bring to my players. But it's in a sense as, there are these people and they are great and interesting, but it's just sort of like a random grab bag of traits and then what makes them interesting in their own merit to be the most genuine about it that I can. Because if I don't want to make the game about, the troubles that oppressed people are facing, I think, at least in my own thinking of it, the best honest way I can do it is to have them here, have them presented, and have them be a part of the world in so much as everybody else.
Well spoken.
Thank you.
I also agree. Would anybody like to follow that up, or should I go?
I mean, I agree. I don't make it a thing. So like sometimes it's a plot point that somebody is like being super racist or super
Right.
whatever. and sometimes it's a thing. I try not to use it as like cheap villainization though. Like bigotry in particular is really easy as a trait to just assign somebody, just to put a flag up that says this is the bad guy, and that's really cheap sometimes. In combination with things, and especially if it's a character trait that comes out over time, I think that can be done well. But like it can be kind of a crutch. But on the other hand, if a player's like, as part of my backstory, I was part of this, oppressed group or whatever, well then I have to build some kind of sentiment about that into the world, just so that that's still a valid part of their backstory. But I don't generally voluntarily do that, because you're right, it's a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's a little bit of escapism, and honestly, sometimes the world kind of sucks. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time making another world that also kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So yeah, those no real disagreements, just kind of a yes and.
Yeah. I like it.
I think it's really important to remember that you're playing a game. When you're running a game, you're running that game for your players. So if they're going to be uncomfortable with certain topics, you don't want to force them through those. That's trauma. That's actually abusive, and it's really bad. You should not do that. But on the other hand, if that is why they're there and they want to explore those ideas, be gay, do crimes, and just go crazy.
Yeah.
I know my next character.
You're gonna go to the brothel. You're gonna cause havoc. You're gonna make money, and you're probably gonna end up in jail. I mean, if that's some people like to play that kind of game.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I did run an entire game where a series of games as part of a campaign, but a series of games, game nights, that were focused on an entity called the People's Mind, right? So I believe in addressing social issues in literature and in fantasy. I think that's one of its most powerful purposes.
Yeah.
Really. So I don't try and shy away from it, but at the same time, I want my players to provide that motivation so that it's pure, and so that I know what direction they want to go with it. Because maybe they're trying to deal with some trauma, or maybe they're angry and they just want to get it out there.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, because that's what this is safe for.
So it's like a session 0 thing.
That's what I was going to say.
It's like, because you definitely don't want somebody who's like, no, D&D is like therapy for me, and it's helping me work through some stuff, and everyone else is like, murder hobo time. Like that. Everybody needs to be on the same page for that. Like whatever page you're on, it just needs to be the same one.
I wish we had the link we could spam up there to the RPG toolkit, and there are some great tools that have been authored recently. Kiana Sunrise on Twitter wrote an amazing tool, and there's some other amazing great things out there too.
If you check into Discord later, Petra will be kind enough to get that up, or she'll give it.
Yes,
to me,
I will
and I'll be able to
definitely
get it
post
up.
up links for definite resources in ZOE Game Night in the
Good deal.
Because it's actually really important. It's hard because I've played all sides of this where I want to include minorities, and that's fine, but then there are people I play with who are like, I'm not comfortable with this, and that's fine too, because we talk about it at the session 0. We see what we're wanting to do with the game, where it's trying to go. And that's where, is this going to be fun hack and slash, depose the king? Haha, he's a bad guy. Or is this going to be, no, let's be introspective about ourselves as people and play something that helps us learn and grow as people. Right. And experience it from a different point of view. And so that's the 2 different types of games. And then again, as I've said before, I use different systems for that, because Pathfinder and D20 games are built up to be more hack and slash combat oriented games.
It's an action adventure movie.
Exactly.
Over the course of 600 hours.
The longest action adventure movie.
Oh yeah, nonstop.
Word to the wise, though, if I've inspired anybody to look at some of these older games that were written before the turn of the century, not all of those game designers were as enlightened. And there is a horrible history in Greyhawk, especially, of using tropisms and just outright racist representations of cultures from Earth and rewriting them to be Oerthians. And so I try and avoid that as much as possible, but it's definitely there in the literature. So if you're not actively working against it, then you're going to run into problematic messes. So I would be careful. But
that is really good to know, because it happens.
Slavers is a module. Like, you get to explore all of that.
Which does.
Or it can be horrible.
It's an interesting thing that they still do include in a lot of modern games as well. Like Pathfinder, a couple of the cities are really big on slavery. And it's, the halflings are all slaves now. It's like, okay, but you're still enslaving a specific race of people.
Yeah.
And it's hard for a certain person to come to that narrative without bringing their trauma
Exactly.
with them.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
I think that specifically because, all sorts of cultures had slavery, so it's going to get a lot of representation in all sorts of ways in fantasy. I'm not, not saying anything about, anything. So that's going to come up, as well as, a lot of the inherent built-in racism of, like, a lot of the monstrous races, who I adore. I love orcs and goblins and hobgoblins and bugbears and lizard folk and all of it. But when you want to use those, you got to be careful that you're not just doing the same stuff that Tolkien was doing and having your orcs be a representation of the Yellow Scare.
Yeah. It's always going to be a hard thing, because everyone goes into, like, playing a monster race or representing these monster races with this background idea of this is who they are to me. And then depending on how you represent that to everybody else, okay, well, now most Null, don't want to say all Nulls, but all Nulls react this way. And it's like, well, now you're starting to border on some more of these tropisms and some issues.
Yeah.
I'm playing in a game right now. As I said, I'm a half dragon dude, but my friend and best buddy is a Null. And immediately people are just like, fucking dog. And he's just like, rude? Like, why are you just immediately making assumptions about me? And then he chews on some bones and stuff. But then, after that, he comes back and talks about it. It's like, trying to turn those kind of assumptions on their head is great. But he could have easily, instead of playing that way, gone really hard into the, I'm just a dog and all my people are dogs, and turned it bad.
Yeah. It's just something you got to be careful with.
Yeah. It's a touchy thing.
There's a great Living Greyhawk module from the first year of Living Greyhawk in their core series called Crystal Caverns of the Cairn Hills. And I don't want to throw too many spoilers in there.
How old is it?
But 2003?
That's like
beyond the
16
spoiler
to 17
limit.
years.
Yeah, I think
I'm
we're
not
good.
telling you
I
to
think
go
we're
play
good.
this module. But this is about world building, so hopefully we've got
The
GMs
module
in
can
the audience.
drive. I feel like
Not
I don't need
players.
to spoiler it.
But
If it's good enough,
But the whole setup is, the players come across this small town. The small town is beset. There are some problematic kobolds in the region.
Kobolds.
We really
I
need
love
those
them.
heroes to save our town, our gnomish town, from these horrible kobolds. We'll take you down there and show you where they keep on coming up from the depths. They're just running off with our children and killing us. Help, help. And you go down there.
Baby.
And if you're a heroic, aggressive murder hobo, or even virtue signaling hero, onward paladins, you go down there and you hack and slash to death these tiny little kobolds. You're just killing them.
They're just little
so
dudes.
easy to kill, and you go after room, and you're slaying all these kobolds until you get to the rooms full of children. And the women and the old people, and they're like, what are you doing? And there's still enough of the warriors to defend those people that you're gonna have to commit genocide. And then you don't want to do that, or maybe you did, and you learn a horrible lesson the hard way. If you've got a good GM, you don't even get that far. But at some point, you run into, holy smokes, why am I doing this? And you run back upstairs, and the gnomes are like, no, you gotta go down there and get all the kobolds. Go get them. Oh my goodness, if we can't get rid of the... So they literally pit two good sides with a misunderstanding against each other and then drop the players in there and say, figure it out or kill everyone. What do you do? They almost never kill everyone. It's
Which is good.
module.
I'm actually really interested to read it because that is... Some of my GMs have an issue with me because the first thing I want to do is I want to talk to people. I want to say, hey...
That's not the issue.
Do we have to fight? Is that second camera break? Got it.
Right.
So
The issue is not that you want to talk to people. The issue is that when people don't want to talk to you, you want to cast Charm Person on them. As
that's a
just
final step.
a default plan.
You know, if you fail on that and they make their save,
You might
they're
get punched.
aware.
Oh, I
that
know.
You've
Oh, I
tried
know.
to.
Oh yeah, it's happened.
It's a pretty nuclear option, actually.
That's why I start with talking. And
There's lots of different ways to play Charm Person. One of them is that sort of psychic, persuasive sort of edge, but in a lot of sense, it's compulsion.
Yeah.
You're familiar with compulsion.
I am.
Okay.
So the way we usually end up playing it is just they take your word, like how the spell usually says is like they take what you say in the most favorable light. They view you as a friend. It's like, oh, cool. I'm not going to tell you to hurt yourself or let us hurt you, but can I see your sword? That looks really cool. Like my dad used to have a sword like that. I'm just wondering if it's from the same maker. Oh, cool. Now I got your sword. Your armor, that looks really comfy. Can I just try that on? Just for a minute. I'll give it right back. And it's like they're not outlandish things.
Right, right.
And I definitely
Well, you gotta take all that armor off. That's getting a little outlandish.
let me help you. Let me help you then.
Doffing
also-
takes a hot minute.
I know.
It also is
Quick remove
one
script
player
wrong.
playing the game. So like that's an issue with it. And as the GM in that very situation, it wasn't fun for me.
That's fine.
Like it wasn't fun for me. And at the end of the day, a game that I'm running, that I have put all of this time into, it needs to be fun for me. If it's not fun for me, then you don't have a game. And you can find another
I
GM.
understand.
You say that, but you also always bring up the story, so I feel like it's unresolved.
I feel like it was a good story. It was where we then had the house rule that I'm not allowed to play bards.
You're now
For sure.
you're now allowed to play bards.
I'm not allowed to play bards for her.
The School of Enchantment is for terrible people.
I never claimed to be a good person.
No, you did. You wrote it on your character
That's
sheet
fair.
next to chaotic.
Chaotic, terrible person.
Chaotic terrible.
And
What I-
necromancers wait until you're dead.
What I was I'm not surprised.
Necromancy is the honest school
Oh my
of
gosh!
magic.
I let a player play a neutral cleric necromancer,
Okay.
and it was all about utility, recycling.
I like it.
You know, let your death serve a purpose. We're tired of this life. Sign this contract now. We'll pay you 100 gold.
Ooh.
And when you die, we'll make sure that your body eventually receives a proper burial after several centuries of use.
Yeah, it's just
Productive
like
contribution to society.
donating your body to science.
I wish I had my
Necroscience.
reduce, reuse, reanimate shirt on right now.
Oh.
It's
It was that. It's a business
it's so
model.
good. So
I let him do it.
This sounds cool.
it sounds cool,
Yeah.
and if it became a problem, you could deal with it then. But
Right.
I
that's
love a good boy necromancer.
I had a player who came to me once with a character concept where it was like healing and necromancy were basically the same thing.
Mm.
And so like culturally, like you need your healers, but also you're kind of weirded out by them because they do the animate the dead thing. But he had connected the two concepts like through the magic system. And I was like, well, I'm about it. We never ended up playing that game because adults have work and stuff that they have to do, which is a shame.
Yep.
But I just thought that was really neat. I'm like, I just want to know where this is gonna go, to be honest, because I think that it's super cool and it makes perfect sense, but I'd never thought of it before.
yeah.
You know?
Well,
Well, guys, it's 8.
it's 8 o'clock.
It's 8
Do we
o'clock.
have any more questions?
Yeah. If there's any more questions from chat, let's Let's hear them. They're gonna check that one is gonna check the Discord to see if there's anybody posting in there.
Yeah, I think just while this is happening, I think a really interesting way to sell your world building, tying into the whole necromancy and healing culturally being very close, is to just try and like take different concepts mechanically that are very simple and like intrinsic to D&D, like necromancy and healing, and seeing how maybe another fictional fantasy culture, which you can get as weird as you want because it's not a real person and it's not a real culture, and in any case, possibly the further you steer away from real cultures when you want to do this weird stuff, the safer you are. Because, there's magic and people who live 600 years naturally. You are allowed to get kind of fun with it. So how would maybe somebody who had a 600-year natural lifespan and had spent that whole time culturally, treating magic as something that was a part of what they had grown up with, how would they maybe see something that's different than your basic bog standard, not European peasant? Big quotes on the not, of course.
This is a really good question.
That's a really weird signal. Boys, buckle up. The boots are on.
They lean back and put their feet up on the table and they're like, oh no!
Not the red cowboy boots.
It's business time.
What is that for people?
Yeah.
I think if I like few boss fights, I don't think I do. I don't like, unless it's plot specific. Like, obviously, if it's like you're going into the tower to kill the wizard, then that's a boss fight, and I should not have to tell you that.
Yeah, that's when it's gonna get built up.
Yeah, but like, if I do like a particularly intricate encounter or a particularly strong bad guy, I don't think I warn players. I don't know. You play in my games, so you probably have a better handle on whether or not I warn you than I do.
Yeah.
I don't know what boss fights are in your games.
Well, good.
They could be bosses or they could be random scrub who just got lucky. I don't know.
Success.
So I don't know if there's boss fights or not. She gets this evil glee in her eye when we're about to do something stupid, though, and that usually leads to a bigger fight.
Yeah.
It's a hazard of being a GM.
You developed a... You've made mistakes.
Is it delighted by something terrible?
See, those are those initial warnings that let you know it's your choice. Do you want to answer the level up, or
Okay, the question: are you sure?
Yeah. Did you say that out loud?
That's my favorite question to ask players. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done something that would let them know there was a boss fight coming. Sharon,
Okay.
you played my game.
Yeah, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything that again wasn't built up by the plot itself,
Yeah.
like explicitly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, I also can't think of an encounter in a game that you ran where like I wished that we had chosen to prepare more or something like that. So I can't think of anything.
I also can't just imagine me like, well, you guys, there was no lead up, but I got my boots on, so
I got my
you know what
boots
that
on.
means. Like, where's the lead up to this boss fight? How did this happen? You walked in with boots and all of a sudden it's Tarrasque.
I'm just gonna do that and wear like the same shirt every time. Just so you get like
This
subliminally
horrible-
associated with it, and then I'm switched up. It's not gonna mean anything, but you won't know that.
But I won't know what it means in the first place because I don't know what your boss fights
Well, no,
are.
'cause it's just like that anecdote in particular about the GM who walked around the table.
That's James. What?
Nice. Like it's about creating the pattern because people recognize patterns whether they know they recognize patterns or not.
Right.
So then when you change it, you can create a feeling of really extreme discomfort without actually having to do anything else. It's actually very easy to do with preparation. So you don't have to know what it means because part of your brain is going to notice that something is different. And in all likelihood, you're not gonna know what. And that just increases that feeling of discomfort, and that's a really valuable thing to be able to do, I think.
Yeah.
Yay.
You're welcome.
That's very sneaky.
What about
It
you
is
guys?
very sneaky. I'm very delighted with that.
Yeah. All of my telegraphing is in universe in the game, just because, I don't know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I do try and telegraph all of like the big things that are coming just a little bit, even if they don't realize that's what's happening, because that's foreshadowing. And I do treat all of the games I run like a movie if it's a one-shot, or like a TV series if it's not.
So it needs to have that, like, it needs to have things that are, like,
Yeah,
foreshadowing previous
I like-
episodes and...
Yeah, just
Yeah.
so they can like call back, run back and like grab. It's like, oh, this is... And even if I just seed something and don't know what it means yet, and then just like have that written down so I know, I can then like wrap that around and be like, it was my, yes. Been
That
my
was the plan.
all along.
I've been experimenting with planting things like that in players, which has been a lot of fun. I had a really great success recently. Bryce, put on your GM hat. So I had two characters, one who was like transplanted from Earth, our Earth, and the others from Galarian, and they were sharing stories. And so the guy from Earth was telling the other character about the Chronicles of Riddick. That was the story that he was sharing. It's this epic tale, and it's the whole thing. And they've performed it in taverns and stuff. It's actually pretty good.
Oh, that's good.
But the other player was like, I don't know what like stories I can give him in return, because I don't know that much about the lore of Galarian. So I was like, have you heard of Isaiah the wizard who lives on the sun? We need to talk about Isaiah the wizard who lives on the sun. So I told him about it because it seriously is my favorite piece of canon Galarian lore. There's one sentence in an otherwise unrelated splat book that's just like, Isaiah is a wizard who lives on the sun. He got tired of Galarian politics. That's it. That's what you know about him.
Fair.
Right? Exactly.
Fucking wizards.
I'm out!
The player pulls this out at the table and is like, so have you heard of Isaiah, the wizard who lives on the sun? And I'm like, yes. Because he just came back to Galarian because somebody stole something of his.
Oh, no.
And they're going to have to actually deal with it. But now it's a feature of the world that I didn't have to tell them myself.
Does he have his hat on?
He's not in that game.
Okay.
His hat's always on.
Yeah.
That's fair. I pointed at James for everyone who did.
I feel like James can keep a secret.
I'm assuming so.
But
Nobody in
we'll
chat-
never know because he won't tell us.
I am a big fan of what you said about random encounters.
Mm.
I don't think random encounters should be just random encounters. I mean, they should be random because you want that sort of element. But I also think that each one of those encounters, while it should only be a potential encounter, it's not needed. But if it shows up, it should have some meaning. The other thing I've been doing for a long time is working on open world gaming. And so in open world gaming, it's kind of a challenge because you not only aren't going to be railroading your characters or your players, but it's hard to keep them from railroading themselves into messes that they're not going to be able to get out of. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of this balancing between, incentivizing certain actions and de-incentivizing others. And random encounters really help in that because you can focus those random encounters on things that are appropriate for their characters at that time, or that will bring them, or that will pique their curiosity and hopefully redirect them away from other things that are problematic. So that's another thing that I think is really important, is to have enough narrative elements that you can bring in at opportune times that are not necessarily this narrative. And also to have enough of those that characters can sort of ignore certain ones. Like, I want to have enough quests so that my players can turn some of them down and not feel like they're going to be missing out on anything. Because in the real world, there's so many opportunities. Every time you go out the door for a day, you're gone for 3 hours, you went to the store, you came back, but there were like 50 opportunities that you completely ignored as you walked down the road. Yeah. but you still notice them, and it's that depth, I think, that helps people to buy in as well.
I think just to also come at the random encounters thing from a different angle, I do it one specific way, which is very helpful because of how my Sunday player group operates. Which all basically boils down to, since James isn't able to come anymore, and James was the absolute blessing of a player who makes sure things happen, and if there is a plot thread or something in front of James, he'll be like, well, this is a thing to do. So we're going to go do it.
He's a good player.
But without James,
Everyone
everything is,
loves
and
James.
this is fine, and I'm working with it, and it's all great. I always approximately overestimate how much content my players will do by like twice as much.
Yeah,
So at this point, I figured out that any time that there's going to be like an extended period of travel that random encounters are going to be a problem in, it doesn't matter when they decide during the session that's going to happen, that's always next session. So I can always, over the course of the week in between, make like a really small, like 3-option table of random encounters, just specific to where they are and where they are heading.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. That's really good.
No, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Is there anything you guys want to bring up about world building? Any topics you want to talk about?
Feel free to disregard all of our advice. Do whatever works for you.
There you go.
Yep.
I mean, if it's fun for you,
And it's fun for the people you're talking to, of course.
then yeah, do the thing.
It's rule 0.
Yeah.
This is a game.
All right. So on that note, guys, I want to say again, thank you 3 for being here.
Thank you.
It's been super fun. We'll do it again sometime, especially if people actually like it. I'm hoping they do. James, thank you so much for being back there on tech. It's super incredibly helpful. I also want to say, coming up on Saturday, I believe 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock is some big stompy robots. I don't know exactly what we're doing, but I know you should come watch it.
Promos and advanced combat tactics.
Promos and advanced combat tactics. So we're gonna punch.
That's what I wrote
things
on the
and-
calendar anyway.
So yeah, that's what
Hell
we're gonna
yeah.
pretend to do. So come watch that. On Monday, as always, we got Masters of the Metaverse at 6 p.m. with James. James.
Where you can see him.
Yep.
It's
James
actually
here.
on screen,
Yeah, he's on screen.
James here.
but on Monday.
Right here is James.
James here.
There.
James here. Right here. And then
For the
next.
spike tape.
Do we have spike tape?
We
down
have
there?
spike tape everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's so spiky.
I haven't even done yet.
And
There's
then
always more.
next Thursday we have the next ZOE game
Two-player
night
games.
is our 2-player game. So it's the 13th. It's the day before Valentine's Day. But I get to spend the night with my lovely wife playing 2-player games. So that's great for me.
You're gonna have to find another lovely wife because I'm scheduled for tech.
I'll find a stand-in wife to play 2-player games with.
Why your actual wife does
We
it?
have.
Well, my actual wife works.
Hold on.
This is going to be a
I-
great night.
I can shuffle some things. We have the same haircut.
I'm about it.
You have it both sides?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. I always see it
And-
flipped over to one side.
It's
And
true.
Glass, do you want to come and play some 2-player games, Ethan?
I could probably reorganize some things. If you need a stand-in lovely wife. Because we have the same haircut.
Yeah, out.
Yep, I've been
All
replaced. A
right,
younger,
so
better
the-
model.
So then you'll get to see me and my lovely new wife, Ethan.
Hey,
Or I'm your wife. It doesn't matter.
I'd like to think I have a wifey way about me.
I like it.
Thank you.
And that's it, guys. So, as always, be safe, have fun, and I'll